Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you, President Davio. It's a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate your indulgence of having me a little bit out of order to accommodate my travel plans, and we have a little election coming up in the States. You may have heard about it. Not particularly important, but we're paying attention to it anyway. So for us, it actually is existential, as we've faced a number of challenges. But it's great to be here. As you may know, our country, the United States, is currently under attack from a bunch of 3- and 5-year-olds and their parents who are walking through Mexico on their way to take us out, apparently. So we've mobilized our military. I think President Trump is now going to bring, finally, our troops home from Afghanistan to defeat this vital attack, which is beyond embarrassing, frankly. At first, it was a little bit humorous. It became embarrassing, and now it's just tragic, what's become of the United States. But I think what's important for you to know as Canadians is that most Americans really do not feel this way. I mean, this is not who we are. It's not who we want to be. This president has picked a fight with our Canadian neighbors for no reason, and it's not what most Americans, even of his own party, believe is the correct approach. But I won't dwell on that because I could go on and on about this, and that's probably not the most important use of our time today. But I do want to talk about the challenges and our experiences in dealing with those challenges over the last 10 years. You know, it was literally 10 years ago, almost to the day, when the wind was at our back. President Obama was elected president. We had a supermajority in the United States Senate, and we had broad majorities in our House of Representatives. We were poised to do some very, very wonderful things, or so we thought. And things turned around fairly quickly and negatively. We did achieve some progress in the 2 years of 2009 and 2010, specifically and probably most notably, for the first time in our country's history, we actually recognized that everybody should have health care. Kind of a, we may have trailed other Western democracies by 4 decades, but we got there. But unfortunately, that became the flashpoint for what we now see, right? It became the rallying cry for our right wing to kind of take back control of our politics. They did it in clever ways. They've been strategic. And we, as organized labor, and specifically public sector unions, have been a large part of that. As you may know, in the United States, our private sector unions have been in decline for quite some time, beginning in about 1980, 1981, with the rise of Ronald Reagan. So our density in the private sector, in other words, the number of union members in the private sector, is down around 6 to 7%. In the public sector, we're up closer to 35 to 40%. We'd be higher yet, but more than half of the states deny public employees the right to collective bargaining. So in the United States, collective bargaining is based on state laws. There's no national law that provides for bargaining rights. And about half our states, a little more than half, do not acknowledge that workers in the public sector should have a right to collective bargaining. And in fact, those that have, we've seen those rights stripped away in some measure. And you know, our version of the RAND formula is just one aspect of that. But the triggering event for all of this was the Great Depression, right? The Great Recession of 2008 caused incredible economic anxiety across our country and across the world. And the right wing was able to use that opportunistically to launch their attacks. We saw a rise in the 2010 elections in our nation of anti-union governors at the state level. You may know some of these names, like Scott Walker in Wisconsin, but it's the Midwest. It was Wisconsin, it was Michigan, it was Ohio, these states in our Midwest, which were strongholds for the union and strongholds for our union, but more generally for the labor movement. We saw a flipping of control to anti-union forces. And what did that mean? That meant for us, in the case of Wisconsin, a strong union state. In fact, the state in which our union was founded, we saw an elimination of collective bargaining rights for public sector workers. Our union had about 60,000 members in Wisconsin at the time Scott Walker was elected. Our union now has 12,000 members in Wisconsin. We no longer have the right to bargain, and more importantly, in some respects, in terms of maintaining the union, we no longer have the right to check off. Workers no longer have the right to the payroll deduction of their dues. When we initially saw this attack, we responded as we always have. We mobilized, we descended on the state capitol, we protested, there were sit-ins at the state capitol. We really had a lengthy campaign. And in hindsight, it was both ineffective and it was doomed for failure. We didn't realize that at the time, of course. And why? So what's our lesson? Lesson number one from Wisconsin. When we're under attack, we went external. We focused on those attacking us. And when it was an existential attack like this, we learned our first response should have been to focus internally on our members and secure our membership and talk with all of our members. Instead, we were focused on our activists and motivating our activists to mobilize and mobilize at the state capitol. So as a union of 60,000 people, we talked to a couple of thousand and we got them mobilized. And there was energy. A lot of the energy came from students who weren't part of our union, but there was energy to fight back against this attack. But when we inevitably lost this attack, we inevitably lost this battle, and it was inevitable because they had the votes and we did not. We were left with nothing, right? We did not have the internal organization built to withstand that kind of assault because we had kind of developed an operating mentality within our union that was very focused on representation, and we did an excellent job of representing our members at the bargaining table and then mobilizing for politics. And that was our model, and it worked. So there's nothing to complain about our model. I'm not criticizing our model. But as the environment changed, as the nature of our adversary changed, as the work of our union changed, we were slow to recognize that in 2010. But we learned lessons out of that defeat. One of the things that ultimately we realized is this attack was broader than just attack on the public sector. So we've seen a rise in what we call in the state's right to work, which affects both the public and the private sector. So we saw that in strongholds such as Wisconsin, Michigan, Indiana, and other states. So about half of our states were actually going into 2010, 22 states were right to work. Now it's 27 states are right to work. So it's a fairly significant increase. And the work goes on. But the target from the right wing was really on the backs of the public sector unions. And there's a reason for that in the states. First of all, we're the strongest unions in America. As I explained before, private sector density is down well below 10%. We have the energy in the public sector unions, we have the resources in the public sector unions, and we have the political strategy in the public sector unions. Our private sector unions lag in all of those regards. Our private sector unions, many are half the size that they were 30 years ago. You think of the auto workers and the steel workers. Their industries have left. It's not as if union members resigned. The jobs left us. The jobs are in Mexico or China or Korea. The jobs left us. The industrial sector, the manufacturing sector has been in large measure decimated in many industries, whether it be steel or auto or other manufacturing, and all, of course, the industries that support those types of industrial operations. So the public sector unions, consisting of AFSCME and our teachers' unions and the Service Employees International Union, are really where the energy is for politics. That wasn't always appreciated by our friends in the Democratic Party, but it was definitely appreciated by our enemies in the Republican Party. As a number of political commentators have noted, the Republicans cared more about labor than the Democrats, but it's not the kind of attention we wanted. So what we've seen is a well-planned and orchestrated attack on public sector unions and our rights to collective bargaining and our right to have a strong union. This has taken its form most notably in Wisconsin, which I've mentioned, but the broader attack was what we called the attack on fair share, which is your RAND formula. We call it fair share payments. The obligation of a non-member to pay fees to cover his or her proportionate share of the cost of representing them. It's a natural extension of fair play. It's what is appropriate. No one has to affiliate with us if they don't want to join, but they do have to pay their fair share of the expenses. So we call these fair share fees or agency fees or representation fees. Has a lot of different names. You call it RAND formula. So those came under attack. The first attack was in 2014. It was a Supreme Court decision, our Supreme Court decision, in a case called Harris. Now we, as a union and SEIU, also represents a number of workers who provide care in the homes of people who are on what we call the Medicaid program. So the clients in these programs are indigent, elderly, and disabled. And having care in their home is preferable for them and more economical than having care in a nursing home or some other institution. So oftentimes the providers, though, were treated very unfairly, treated like domestics, right? Being paid $7.25 an hour. But they were also considered to be independent contractors. So they couldn't unionize. So the client would hire and fire them. We figured out a mechanism to essentially have a public employer of record for this particular group of people. So they would be kind of quasi-public employees. We could not get them full-fledged public employment because the expense of pensions and health care, as is provided to our regular members, would be too much, especially given what was going on in our country, which is one tax cut after another. But we had long-range plans, of course, to bring them into the public sector, but we needed to develop that organization, and we did. And we've raised the wages of this group phenomenally. But what the Supreme Court said in 2014 is we could not charge them fair share fees. They said they're not really regular public workers, they're different, and therefore they shouldn't have to pay fair share fees. And they made up an artificial distinction to undermine a Supreme Court precedent which is 40 years old, which says we can charge fair share fees in the public sector. So that was 2014. There were already cases in the pipeline to challenge fair share fees for other public employees, all public employees, under our First Amendment right to free speech. So, you know, in the United States, everything's about money. And what our Supreme Court said is money talks, money is speech. So you can't regulate how much money goes into politics. But requiring somebody to pay money, to a public employee to pay money, is somehow impinging upon their speech, right? Because money talks. Later on, in a case called Citizens United, our Supreme Court said money talks as much as it wants, right? So money talks in the United States, and it gets to talk as much as it wants because we cannot regulate money. So that was also turned on its head to mean that we could not compel anybody in the public sector who did not want to pay dues, pay fees to the union, to pay those fees. And so that was attacked in Harris. And we saw the writing on the wall that it would ultimately lead to right-to-work status for the entire public sector. So we had notice, our union had notice in 2014 that our days were numbered where we could have fair share. Now, this was not spontaneous. This was not opportunistic. This was a decades-long plan from the right wing. We just didn't know it. We've seen the evidence of it now. But some of you may have heard of the Koch Brothers, a very rich pair of brothers, have about $90 billion in wealth between them. They own a number of companies, Georgia Pacific, which makes paper products, a lot of energy companies. The Koch brothers also are libertarians, except when it comes to accepting corporate welfare. They're okay with that. But in most other respects, very libertarian, and recognized that the backbone of the Democratic Party in the United States of America was public sector unions. we would be the groups that mobilize and fund in an organized way the Democratic Party. There is no other organized constituency. We have environmental groups, they're under-resourced. We were essentially key to maintaining Democratic Party majorities in a number of places. They recognized it and appreciated it and decided to try to cut us off at the knees. And that's what this is all about for them. So they had a strategic plan to undermine progressive political power that started and almost ends with us. They created a number of groups that were organized and active at the state level, starting at the state level, because that's where our recognitions lied. That's where our exclusive representation played out, at the state and local government level. There's another union that represents our national government employees, our federal employees. They were already substantially weaker for a lot of reasons, including never having the ability to collect fair share fees. But the recognition was, it was the unions, the teachers' unions, and AFSCME and SEIU that really had the power, and that was something they had to take care of at the state level. So while many of us were preoccupied with federal politics, they weren't. They were playing it at the state level, and effectively. So they engaged in this political and policy activity, and they supplemented it with judicial activity, with legal activity. And that was their strategy, both through the political process and also capturing the judiciary. Now, what you may not know about the United States is we sometimes elect our judges. And if you think we've made a mistake electing our president, you should see some of the judges we've elected. And they're sleepy elections, right? Think of yourselves as a voter, and people are running to be a judge. How do you know who they are, right? I mean, think about that. You have no idea. But the right wing would play and play big in these elections. And by play, I mean money, significant money. An example is in West Virginia, which is a substantial coal mining state. There's a guy who owns a coal company called Massey Energy. This guy's name happens to be Massey. He literally bought 3 Supreme Court justices and got them elected to protect his interests. Ultimately, he went to jail anyway. That's what happens when you kill 24 miners, but only for a year. But ultimately, in a broader sense, they want to control the judiciary, both through the election process, but also some of our judges are appointed, and through that end, by electing politicians, they get, quote unquote, the right kind of judges. So this was, in our view, a well-planned and a well-executed operation by the right wing. We had now, in 2014, in our view, probably 2 years to figure this out. 2 years before the entire public sector would be right to work. We used those 2 years to kind of set our goals. We developed a program that we called AFSCME Strong. It consisted of 5 pillars. Internal organizing was first and foremost. We're a union at AFSCME of, at the time, about 1.2 million members. Let's just use that number. We set a goal that we were going to have one-on-one conversations with 1 million of our members. Very ambitious. A lot of us looked at that goal and says, well, that's a nice goal. It's always good to have goals, but not realizing if we ever could get there. But we wanted to have those 1 million conversations because we had done some polling of our members. And we asked them, if you didn't have to pay dues to the union, would you continue to do so? Fully 30% said, no, I don't think so. So we were facing defection rates of 30%, we thought. And we thought that might even be an underestimate, that it could go higher, right? This is a pollster's question. When you're confronted with it, you could very well have said yes to the pollster, I'd stick with the union, then not. In our union, the dues are about $500 US or a little bit more. It's usually between $500 and $700 US for union dues annually. As I sometimes will say, and when we're talking among staff, we ask our members to buy us a new refrigerator every year, but they only get to buy a new refrigerator for themselves every 12 years. So it's a big financial commitment. We are a diverse union. The average wage is about $45,000, $46,000 US. We have some members who make well above that and many who make below that. But public workers in the United States typically do not make a lot of money, as elsewhere. I mean, it's not unique. But we recognized we had a lot of work to do internally. We needed to do more external organizing, including in the private sector, especially where work has been contracted out. We needed to engage in a rebranding effort. Not that we're trying to sell a product, but we needed to make sure that we had a common vision of ourselves. The rebranding was for ourselves as well as externally, but very much about our own members so they could feel a sense of connection with each other and with their union. So we engaged in a rebranding effort. We definitely felt we needed to develop what we call an economic agenda that's broader than the union members within AFSCME, because our Democratic Party was not running on economic issues. We don't even know what they were running on, and neither did they. So our view was we got to create a coherent economic agenda, try to obtain some buy-in to the extent we can to move forward. And a great example of this is in 2016, when Ms. Clinton was the candidate for president, and the Democratic Party had been in the White House for 8 years under President Obama. And I would say to friends, what is the Democratic Party's economic platform right now? And people really couldn't answer the question. And I'm dealing with sophisticated people, right? People who pay attention to this stuff. And we really couldn't answer that question. And my answer was, it was the Trans-Pacific Partnership. That's all President Obama would talk about for 2 years, last 2 years in office. So the economic platform of the Democratic Party was one that was antagonistic to the interest of workers. It's not a surprise that we lost the election when you look at it that way. So we felt we needed an economic agenda that we would develop with coalition allies and try to move as kind of a baseline among the progressive movement in the United States. And finally, we felt we needed to examine our internal structure. Where we had many affiliates in a state, perhaps we need to consolidate. What can we do better? What we can do more effectively? What can we do more efficiently? That was really what we're embarking on. And frankly, as you know, from internal union operations, these are not easy questions to answer because there's internal politics within our unions and institutions and expectations, and we have to work within those systems. It's a democratic system in our union just like it is here. And you have to take these things a step at a time. But we had those 5 pillars: internal organizing, external organizing, rebranding, economic agenda, and an examination of our internal structures. But if clearly faced with the loss of fair share fees, the most important aspect of this is the internal organizing aspect. So we had that goal of 1 million conversations. We actually met it. We've actually met it over the course of 3 years. 4 years. It took us till June of this year to meet it. So we've had that 1 million conversations. Prior to these conversations, most, and when I mean most, I mean supermajorities of our members had not heard from us. They did not have those conversations. We were not talking to them. Our view was kind of, they pay their dues, we deliver good contracts, we're protecting pensions, everybody's happy. Everybody's happy until something disrupts the happiness. And the right wing was the great disruptor. So for us to survive as a union, we need to go back to our roots of conversations and organizing. We did phone banking, door-to-door, workplace meetings, all of the things that you know how to do as union activists, all of the things we know we have to do. We wanted to ensure that those who were agency fee payers, fair share fee payers, were limited to the extent we could limit them, right? So we wanted to convert the non-members who were paying fees into membership because we knew on day one we would lose those folks. And a lot of our affiliates had more fair share fee payers than they should have had because it didn't matter, right? We don't care if you're a member or not, as long as we're getting the funding to support our union, all was good. Well, the day after that Supreme Court decision, we knew that group was gone, right? They would no longer be paying any dues at all, providing any financial support to the union at all, and it would be a strain on our resources. So we set a target that no affiliate would have less than 90% membership. And we met that target, and we exceeded that target. Now, this did not happen. This wasn't free, right? For those of you who know economic terms, there was a huge opportunity cost for us doing this work. We moved resources. We changed our resource allocation from service and representation to organizing. So I'm not going to sugarcoat it. That's what happened. As the director of our collective bargaining and research activities, I can tell you, I don't think we suffered any negative outcomes because of that. I don't think our contracts are worse. I don't think our settlements are less than they would have been. And I don't think we've given more concessions at the bargaining table than otherwise would have been the case. So I don't think there's been a perceptible erosion of the quality of our members' jobs. But we did internally have to allocate more resources to conversations and less to some of the other technical duties that we would perform. The most important change we made, perhaps, is the emphasis we now place on new employee recruitment. We attend formal orientation sessions that the employer provides. We've negotiated access to those, and we've put systems in place so we not only attend that meeting, which we've always attended, and try to recruit, but we follow up with the new member in the workplace 6 times in their first 90 days of employment. If somebody doesn't join, we continue to ask them to join, and then we will actually move that person to another union representative to ask them to join. So they're getting requests to join the union from multiple sources if they are not joining the union. If they are joining the union, we don't forget about them, say, got them, let's move on. Nope. We keep them in, right? We keep the discussion going. We seek their activity in some of our affairs, whether it be a contract demonstration or a political campaign or anything that's going on in the workplace. We seek to get their involvement, knowing if we get a new employee involved with us early, they will stick with us. They will maintain that involvement through their career. If we, as a union, do not contact folks, do not seek their involvement in our union for years, it's very difficult to get that person involved after they've been working somewhere 7, 8 years and never did anything with the union before. So we want to condition people, condition our members to be active members, to work with us. So the effect of Janus, we were concerned about membership defection, of course, but the immediate aftermath was we've lost 80,000 members. Lost about 7% of our membership, not members, I should say, payers. These were the fee payers. In terms of members, a chunk of these fee payers, we're still gathering the data. The Janus decision, which created right to work in the public sector, is only 4 months old. So we're still collecting our data and reviewing membership reports. But we do know more fee payers have joined the union than members have quit. So our net membership is up, although our revenues are down. Our revenues are down because we lost the fee payers, but the fee payers were never members. But we have more members now than we did before the decision. And that didn't happen by accident. That happened through the organizing work that we've done, the internal organizing work that we've done. Now, this also happened in the context where our right-wing opponents didn't just win a case and pop the champagne corks. They've run a campaign. They are emailing our members, they are sending mail to our members, and in some cases, they're actually door-knocking our members, supposedly to tell them, oh, you've got new rights. We see flyers that they hand out that says, you know, give yourself a pay raise, lose nothing by quitting the union, but don't have to pay dues. This is the campaign they're running, and it's a well-financed campaign. They have publicly said, our opponents have said collectively, that they will spend $150 million this calendar year seeking to persuade our members to resign their membership. So this is a well-financed, well-organized campaign. This is not something, as I said a couple times before, that just happened. This is a strategy to weaken our union. And our view is, if our members don't hear from us, they're only going to hear from them, right? So through these one-on-ones and making connections, making the connections that we need to make with our membership, we're able to overcome and inoculate our members from these messages. You know what I mean? Because you got to know who these groups are. These groups are the same ones trying to take away our pensions. They're the same ones arguing for outsourcing jobs. They're the same ones arguing for downsizing the government. And now they're going to the object of their attacks and saying, I'm on your side against your union. That's what's going on. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. That's exactly what's happening. So this is not, in our view, a tough sell, but we have to make the sell, right? We have to do the work. If our members don't hear from us, I'll say it again, if our members don't hear from us, they're going to hear from them. And we're going to be on the short end. So that, for us, is the most important message. Because these right-wing attacks are going to continue. And the immediate results in our union are good, all right? But we're not here, I'm not here, to declare victory. Because the question for us, for AFSCME, the existential question is, have we institutionalized the change? Are we going to continue to be a union that talks to its members? Can we do that? If we don't, we will slowly atrophy. You know, just the natural turnover in our workplaces means that about half of the workforce is new every 8 years if we're not recruiting new employees. And some new employees only stick around, as you know, for a year or two. So you've got to replace them constantly. If we don't do that work, we'll be a much weaker union, much weaker from a resource standpoint, but perhaps more importantly, we won't be speaking for the majority. And that is the next attack. So they're not done with us yet. They are attacking now the idea of exclusive representation and collective bargaining for the entire bargaining unit. They are trying to create a system of labor relations in the United States that more closely resembles those in some European countries where there may be multiple unions in a workplace and none of them speak for a majority of the workers. We know that that is the road, frankly, the road to hell. We'll have nothing. If we don't speak for the entire unit, we're not speaking for anybody. And one of the things we must overcome is the internal appeal that that has. And by that I mean some of our own leaders think that we should only represent our members. If these guys don't want to join, they don't want to pay us, they don't want us, why should we do anything for them? The reason we need to do things for them is because if we don't maintain that exclusive representation, exclusive means the only one, right? We're the only representative of the entire unit, we will erode our own power. We will not have the power to gain what we need to gain. That is the trap that's being set for us as we speak. So many commentators and many activists in labor in the US think, oh, the right wing got what they wanted. They got their right to work. No, this is the middle step. The next step is the elimination of exclusive representation and the ability to collective bargain in a meaningful way. That is what they're after. That is essentially the abolition of powerful unionism in the United States. And they are not going to stop short of that. And I don't think I'm being hysterical in this. I mean, we can deny it, and in fact, our union denied it. You know, we had the event, it's hard to say good fortune, but the Janus decision should have been decided about a year or so earlier, in 2016. But one of the Supreme Court justices who would have ruled against us died. So we had a reprieve. And then we assumed, or hoped, that a Democratic president would win, because as you may know, the Republican Senate blocked Obama's appointment to the Supreme Court, which would have been the fifth vote in our favor. So there was a vacancy, and when Clinton didn't win, it was obvious what Trump was going to do. And we kind of went on hold for a few months. Naturally, we had a letdown and did not do the organizing we should have, but there was renewed emphasis, and we were no longer in denial. Our union is no longer in denial. We know they're coming for us. They're coming for collective bargaining. They're coming to undermine exclusive representation. And we're going to have the fight of our lives to hold on to it. So what does it really mean? It means that we have a challenge ahead of us. We have to maintain what we're doing. We have to institutionalize it. We are also looking at alternative forms of representation. You know, they may win. They may win on Tuesday. They may win. The Supreme Court is going to decide this issue. They left their trail of breadcrumbs in that Janus decision that undermined us in June, where the very idea of exclusive representation was attacked in the opinion, saying that we normally wouldn't even tolerate exclusive representation, much less fair share fees, is basically the language that was used. So even if we win elections, we have 5 hostile judges out of 9 on our Supreme Court. And as early as 2020, they may say collective bargaining in the public sector is unconstitutional. It's a violation of a non-member's First Amendment right to have the union speak for that non-member, because the rationale is the things we bargain about are matters of public concern, because obviously any wage increase we get affects taxes in the budget. So that's the direction they very well could be headed. So we've learned we need to plan now. We need to keep our membership tight, but we also need to explore alternative forms of representation. We're seeing work changing in the United States, more outsourcing. And as we outsource government functions, the contractor has subcontractors. And each time you go down that chain and the operator takes their grab of profit, the quality of the jobs deteriorates. And more than that, in service occupations, because we represent a lot of service workers, custodial, food service, that kind of work. They transform that work into independent contractors, or claim that they're independent contractors, which in the US basically means that individual's on their own in terms of benefits. They get a paid a wage, but there's no retirement, there's no health benefit. Oftentimes, not even workers' compensation for injury on the job. That is the kind of workforce the right wing thinks it should create in the United States of America. They are turning our country into the labor standards will be transformed into third world country labor standards. And that is at your southern border. Perhaps you'll be able to withstand it, and perhaps not. But we're seeing work transforming on a basis that isn't good for workers, and we're seeing labor rights and collective rights transforming on a basis where we may have none. So those are the challenges, twin challenges, different in nature, different responses. And frankly, we haven't yet figured out how we're going to deal with those. We are studying the issue internally. There are obvious answers, but they're not answers, they're ideas. So people can answer a question, we don't know if they'll work. In France, they have sectoral bargaining, right? People are probably aware of it. We have some instances, I think, here and elsewhere. Bottom line is, in France, union membership is less than 10%. You have weak unions. Macron has instituted reforms that have clearly undermined labor standards in France. So we hope that's not our future. But that's what lies ahead for us. This fight to preserve whatever power we still have, strategies that need to be developed to build more power, and the willingness to stick to it, to have discipline, to ensure we build our union internally. So that's the extent of my wisdom for today. May not be much, but it's what I got. So I would urge you to think about that and see how or if it applies to your situation. Because I'm not nearly as familiar with the Canadian system as I should be. But I do know you're struggling. I know we're looking at things here in Ontario, well, not here, across the river, where they're rolling back some of the positive labor reforms. So I don't think you're immune to this. I would like to believe it won't go as far as it goes in our country, but you're a better judge of that than I am. So appreciate your time, and I wish you luck.